I was the only one who attended my husband's funeral. A row of empty pews faced me as I stood by Richard's closed casket. Our children, Alex and his wife, and Anna, chose cruises and business trips instead of saying goodbye to the man who raised them. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the Elderly Stories channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. The funeral home employee seemed more uncomfortable than I was as he glanced at the empty seats. It was a gray Monday typical for October when the sky cannot decide whether to cry or just threaten. Richard always hated indecision. "Mrs. Helen, would you like to wait a few more minutes?" he asked discreetly, checking his watch. "No, you can begin," I replied. My voice came out firmer than I expected. Richard hated delays. The pastor, a man who never met my husband in life, began to recite generic words about a good man and precious memories while I fixed my eyes on the arrangement of white lilies on the casket. Richard would have preferred something simpler, maybe just the red roses from our garden, the ones he faithfully pruned for 43 years. I sat alone in the front row. 5 empty chairs around me shouted louder than any eulogy. Our 2 children, their spouses, our grandson Daniel, none of them present. Alex sent a text the night before. "Sorry, Mom. Important meeting in Chicago. Can't reschedule. I'll call you next week." No further explanation, no attempt to adjust his schedule to say goodbye to his own father. I imagined him sitting in some expensive conference room, checking his watch, occasionally, vaguely thinking about the funeral happening miles away. Anna was worse. She did not even send a text. Her secretary called to say that Anna was indisposed and could not travel. Indisposed, as if we were talking about a Sunday brunch, not the final farewell to the man who carried her on his shoulders throughout her childhood. When the brief service ended, I followed the casket to the cemetery. The cold wind cut my face, but I did not cry. Not because I was not mourning, but because I had already cried so much in recent weeks that there seemed to be no tears left. The casket descended into the earth, and I threw a handful of dirt on it. The dirt hit the wood with a hollow sound like the echo of my footsteps through the now empty house. I returned home, that same house where we raised our children, where Richard and I built a life for almost 5 decades. His slippers were still by the armchair, the remote control positioned exactly where he left it. The silence was deafening. I poured myself a glass of the good wine we saved for special occasions. This was not special, but it felt appropriate. I picked up my phone and, driven by an impulse I could not contain, I opened Instagram. Anna's profile was first on my feed. She had posted 3 hours earlier, exactly during her father's funeral. A photo on a yacht, champagne glasses held high, a radiant smile. The caption read, "Living my best life." I swallowed hard. My daughter was not indisposed. She was on a yacht celebrating while I buried her father. I kept scrolling. Alex had also posted a selfie in a conference room with a caption about closing big deals and worthwhile networking. No mention of his father, not a word about mourning, as if this were just another ordinary day. I turned off the phone and took a long sip of wine. On the wall in front of me, a photograph of us on our 40th wedding anniversary. Richard and I were smiling, holding hands in front of the rose bushes he planted when we moved into this house. They were blooming in deep red in that photo. Now, like him, they were withered. "Tomorrow," I decided aloud, "I'm calling Mr. Martinez." Mr. Martinez had been our lawyer for over 3 decades. He had drafted our will just 2 years ago when everything seemed simple and fair. Half for Alex, half for Anna, with a small portion reserved for Daniel, our only grandson. The house for them to sell or decide between themselves. The cabin in the mountains for them to enjoy as a family. That night I sat alone in the kitchen, the same place where Richard used to make breakfast every Sunday without fail. He always made extra pancakes for the kids, even years after they left home. "You never know when they might show up," he would say with a hopeful smile. They rarely showed up, only when they needed something. I opened the desk drawer where we kept our important documents. I ran my fingers over the organized envelopes, bills, deeds, insurance policies, until I found the brown folder labeled Will.
Chosen,
Inside the document that Richard and I had signed 2 years ago now seemed like a relic from another time, a time when we still believed our children cared about us, a time when duty and love still seemed to be the same thing. I closed the folder and went to our bedroom. Richard's pills were still on the nightstand. The doctor had said it would be quick, but it was not. It was 6 months of slow decline of hospital visits of hope followed by despair. 6 months in which Alex visited twice and Anna only once always, with ready excuses about work kids' commitments. When Richard finally passed, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was holding his hand. He opened his eyes, smiled slightly, and said, "You were always the best part of me, Helen." And then he was gone. I called the children immediately. Alex said he would come on the weekend. Anna promised to take the first available flight. Neither of them kept their promise. The next morning, I called Mr. Martinez. His secretary, Linda, answered, and upon hearing my voice, her tone changed. "Oh, Mrs. Helen, my deepest condolences. We just heard about Mr. Richard." "Thank you, Linda. I need to schedule an appointment with Mr. Martinez. It's urgent." "He has an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Does that work for you?" "Perfect." I slept poorly that night. Not because of the decision I had made, but in spite of it. For the first time in weeks, I felt I had a purpose, a clarity. It was as if Richard was by my side nodding in silent approval. Mr. Martinez's office smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee. He stood up when I entered his face, expressing sincere condolences. "Helen, good to see you. I'm so sorry about Richard. He was an extraordinary man." "Thank you, Mr. Martinez. He truly was." I sat in the leather chair opposite his desk. "I need to modify our will." He nodded without surprise. Many widows and widowers came through here with the same request. "I understand. Do you want to make any specific revisions?" "I want to remove Alex and Anna completely." This did surprise him. He slowly took off his glasses. Completely. I want everything, the house, the cabin, the accounts, the investments to go to Daniel. Your grandson? Yes. Mr. Martinez cleared his throat. "Helen, I know this is a difficult time, but decisions made during grief can be—" "I buried Richard alone," I interrupted. My voice was calm but firm. Neither of our children attended the funeral. Anna was on a yacht celebrating with friends. Alex was in a business meeting that he could have easily rescheduled. Meanwhile, Daniel called every day during his grandfather's illness. He was the one who mowed our lawn when Richard got sick. He was the one who drove me to the hospital on nights when I could not drive. He is only 22, but he has more character than his parents combined. Mr. Martinez was silent for a moment. "I understand," he said finally. "We will prepare the new documents. I must inform you that your children can contest this decision after your passing. They can try, but I want it structured as securely as possible, a trust for Daniel that cannot be touched by his parents. That can be arranged." He made some notes. "Do you want to set any conditions for Daniel's access to the funds?" "Only that he cannot access everything at once until he turns 30, except for education or medical emergencies. He's sensible, but young." Mr. Martinez nodded. "I will prepare everything for your signature by the end of the week." Upon leaving the office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was not revenge, it was justice. It was honoring Richard's memory in the only way I had left, ensuring his legacy went to someone who truly valued it. I walked slowly to the car, watching the people on the street. A mother with a little girl passed me, both laughing at some private joke. I felt no envy, just a quiet understanding that family ties are more complicated than they appear in Christmas photos. That night, for the first time since Richard's death, I did not wear his old sweater to bed. I lay down in our bed, now my bed, and let the silence envelop me. It was no longer a painful silence, but a peaceful one. Richard used to say, "True love does not need recognition, but it deserves respect." Our children had forgotten that lesson, but I had not. The papers were signed on a cloudy Thursday. Mr. Martinez watched me as I moved the pen across the dotted lines with quiet determination. I did not hesitate once. When you bury your husband alone while your children post champagne, selfies, Legal documents are no longer intimidating. "It's done," Mr. Martinez said, gathering the papers. "The process will be discreet, but I must warn you, at some point Alex and Anna will find out." "I know," I replied, putting my pen back in my purse. "And when they find out, let them find out from me." As I left the office, I felt a strange sense of release. Not joy or revenge, just a weight removed. The weight of trying to keep an illusion alive, the illusion that my children were still the people Richard and I dreamed they would be. At home, I opened a closet I had not touched in months. Inside boxes organized by year, each containing checks, bank statements, and receipts. A meticulous accounting not only of money, but of the one-sided generosity that marked my relationship with my children for decades. I took the folder marked Alex Business and Education. Inside a collection of expenses that added up to more than many people earn in a lifetime. The payment for his MBA at a foreign university. The $70,000 for the initial investment in his first business, which failed in less than a year. The $120,000 for the down payment on the mansion he needed to impress clients. The imported car to keep up appearances. With each request, Richard would frown, but ended up giving in. "He's our son," he would say. "One day he'll learn." That day never came. Anna's folder was equally revealing. The extravagant wedding that cost as much as an apartment. The renovations on the penthouse she deserved after working so hard. The vacations in the Maldives to recover from stress. The private school for her son that was absolutely necessary for his future. Each request came with the implicit promise of more visits, more calls, more connection. Promises that dissolved as soon as the money was transferred. What struck me now looking at those folders was not the amount itself, but the pattern. There was never genuine gratitude, only a constant expectation that we would always be there to help. As if our money, the fruit of decades of hard work and savings, was somehow part of their early inheritance. I closed the folders and placed them back in the closet. Not out of remorse, but to keep them as evidence. Not for a court of law, but for my own heart. The phone rang at 7:32 p.m. that night. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Grandma, can I stop by tomorrow? I found some books that Grandpa would have liked, and, well, I wanted to show them to you." I felt a lump in my throat. "Of course, sweetheart, come for lunch." The next day I made lasagna Richard's favorite. Daniel arrived promptly at 12:00 p.m., carrying a bag of used books and the same gentle smile as his grandfather. We had lunch on the patio, talking about simple things. He told me about college, about his part-time job at a bookstore, about his plans to get a master's degree. He spoke with enthusiasm, but without that frantic ambition that always characterized his parents. "You know, Grandma," he said, serving himself more salad. I sometimes think about how Grandpa approached life. He always said that success wasn't about having a lot, but about needing little. I smiled. Those were Richard's exact words. "Your grandfather would be proud of you, Daniel." "Do you really think so?" There was a vulnerability in his voice that reminded me of him as a child, always seeking approval, never demanding it. "I'm sure of it." After lunch, he insisted on washing the dishes. While drying the plates, he told me he was thinking about applying to a research program in Mexican literature, but he was worried about the cost. "How much does it cost?" I asked casually. He mentioned a sum that was less than a tenth of what his father had asked for his last investment. "Apply," I replied simply. "But Grandma, it's expensive, and I know that." "Daniel," I interrupted gently, "what do you think your grandfather and I saved for all our lives?" He fell silent, running the cloth over an already dry plate. "For moments like this," I continued, "to help people who truly value the opportunity." When he left, taking the rest of the lasagna I insisted he take, I stood at the door watching his old car drive away. The contrast between him and his parents could not be clearer. Anna called the next day. It was the first time I heard her voice since the funeral she did not attend. "Mom," her voice sounded irritated, "Daniel told me you're going to pay for his research scholarship." Not a hello, not a how are you, straight to the money. "Good morning to you too, Anna." Sorry, she said, not sounding truly sorry. I'm just worried. You just lost Dad. You shouldn't be making important financial decisions right now. I took a deep breath. In fact, I've made several important financial decisions recently. What kind of decisions? The concern in her voice was not for me, but for the potential impact on her inheritance. Why don't you come visit me? We can talk in person. There was a pause. I'm very busy with work, Mom. You know how it is. Yes, I know exactly how it is. My voice was calm. It was the same reason you couldn't come to your father's funeral while you were on a yacht with champagne. Silence on the other end. How did you know? Instagram, Anna. You posted photos during your father's burial. Another silence followed by a rushed explanation. Mom, that was complicated. I was going through a lot emotionally and… Save me the details, I interrupted. Come see me if you want to talk. Otherwise, I'll assume you're very busy as always. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from anger but from relief. Decades of swallowing words, of looking the other way, of excusing the inexcusable. Finally over. Alex showed up the next day, unannounced as he always did when he wanted something. His imported car parked in the driveway with that ostentation that always made me uncomfortable. Mom, he hugged me briefly. Are you okay? You look tired. I'm fine, Alex. What brings you here? He looked around as if evaluating the house. Anna told me about your conversation. We're worried about you. Are you? Yes, he said, sitting on the sofa, the same armchair where Richard used to sit. Losing Dad was hard on all of us. I imagine so, I replied, although some seem to have handled it better than others. He had the decency to look ashamed. Look, Mom, about the funeral. I really couldn't cancel that meeting. It was crucial for the business I know. I sat across from him. The same business your father and I gave $70,000 to start. He blinked, surprised by the direct mention. Normally, I never talked about money like that. That was years ago. Yes, it was. Just like the $120,000 for the down payment on your house, and the $45,000 to pay off your debts when your first marriage ended. And the… Why are we talking about this now? He interrupted, visibly uncomfortable. Because your father died, Alex. And I'm taking inventory not only of our assets, but of our choices. He shifted in his chair. What exactly does that mean? It means I modified our will. You and Anna have been removed. The shock on his face would have been almost comical if it weren't so predictable. What do you mean, removed? You can't just… I can and I did. Everything is going to Daniel. Daniel, his voice went up an octave. My nephew, he's practically a kid. He's 22 years old. He's a professional and has more integrity in his little finger than you've shown in decades. Alex stood up, his face red. This is unfair. It's the grief talking. You're not thinking clearly. On the contrary, I replied calmly, I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. Your father built everything we have with hard work and principles that you and your sister seem to have forgotten. This is about the funeral, isn't it? I already apologized for that. No, Alex. The funeral was just the final punctuation on a long story. A story of taking without giving, of demanding without thanking, of treating your parents like a bank, not like people who loved you unconditionally. He was silent for a moment. Then he tried another approach. Let's talk about this calmly. Maybe we can reach an agreement, something that… There is no agreement to be made. The decision is made. You're going to regret this, he said, grabbing his keys. Anna and I can contest the will, you know. You can try, I replied, but you would only be proving my point. He slammed the door on his way out. Through the window, I saw him pick up the phone immediately, probably calling Anna. I imagined the frantic conversation, the accusations, the plans to make me see reason. That night, for the first time since Richard's death, I opened a bottle of the wine we saved for special occasions. I poured a glass and took it to the patio. The rose bushes that Richard cared for so lovingly were beginning to wither with the arrival of autumn, but there were still some stubborn flowers resisting like me. Looking at the garden, I remembered something Richard used to say. "Love is like these roses, Helen. It needs constant care, regular pruning, and sometimes it needs to face winter to bloom again." Our winter had arrived, and I was ready to survive it. 3 days passed in a strange silence. No calls from Alex or Anna, only texts from Daniel asking if I needed anything from the supermarket. The calm before the storm, I thought as I watered the plants on the patio. The storm arrived on a Thursday in the form of Anna and her husband Frank parking their shiny SUV in the driveway. She did not knock. She never knocked. She just walked in as if the house were still partially hers. "Mom," she said, dropping her designer handbag on the entrance table. "We need to talk." Frank stayed a few steps behind, uncomfortable as always. He never really fit into our family, always checking his phone during Sunday dinners, always with one eye on the door as if looking for an exit. "Good morning to you too, Anna," I replied calmly, continuing my watering. "Is it true what Alex told me?" I put the watering can on the ground and turned to face her. My daughter so similar to me physically and so different in spirit. Her eyes, the same as mine, now narrowed with suspicion. "It depends on what he said. That you disinherited us, that you're giving everything to Daniel. This is crazy, Mom." I motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, then settled rigidly on the sofa. Frank remained standing still, looking at his phone. "It's not crazy, Anna. It's a consequence." "A consequence of what?" "Of not attending a funeral." The coldness in her voice hit me like a slap. It was not just the absence at the funeral. It was the complete lack of acknowledgement of the gravity of that moment. "Do you really think it's just about the funeral?" She crossed her legs, adjusting her expensive skirt. "What else would it be?" I took a deep breath. "Your father was sick for 6 months, Anna. 6 months in which you visited only once for less than 2 hours before inventing an emergency at the office. 6 months in which you didn't call to ask how he was. And when he passed away, you preferred a yacht trip to saying goodbye." I was processing it in my own way, she defended herself. "Not everyone deals with grief the same way." "That's not dealing with grief, that's ignoring it." She looked at her husband for support, but he was busy answering emails. "And what about Daniel?" she continued. "He barely knew Dad. Why does he deserve everything and we get nothing?" The injustice of that statement was almost comical. "Daniel visited your grandfather every week. He read to your father when his vision began to fail. It was Daniel who helped organize the medications, who drove me to the hospital on nights when I couldn't drive. He knew him, Anna, and more importantly, he cared." "This isn't fair," she said, her voice rising. "We have a right to that inheritance. It's ours by law." "Actually, it's not. The assets are mine now, and I can decide who they go to when I'm gone." Frank finally put his phone away, sensing the growing tension. "Mrs. Helen," he intervened, "Anna is just worried about you. Decisions made during grief can be—" "Save me your facade of concern, Frank," I interrupted. "You two never cared about me or Richard except when you needed money or favors." The silence that followed was thick. Anna seemed genuinely shocked, not by the accusation itself, but because I had finally verbalized it. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "We're your family." "Family." My voice was low but firm. "Family visits. Family calls. Family shows up in difficult times, not just on holidays and birthdays, when gifts are involved." Anna stood up, her face red. "You're being cruel. Dad would never approve of this." "Your father," I replied calmly. "He sat in that armchair for 6 months, waiting for his children to come see him one last time. He died disappointed. Don't talk to me about what he would approve of." She grabbed her bag with jerky movements. "This isn't over, Mom. Alex is already talking to a lawyer. You can't just cut us off like this." "Actually, I can, and I did." When they left, she did not slam the door. I closed it gently with the same quiet firmness that had sustained me since Richard's death. I went back to the patio to my plants. The watering can was still on the ground where I left it. I finished watering the azaleas, Richard's favorites, and sat in the rocking chair. The phone rang inside the house. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later it rang again, and again. On the fourth try I answered. "Hello. Helen, it's Charles." Our longtime neighbor's voice sounded worried. "Is everything okay? I saw Anna leave your house practically running." Charles and his wife Lucy had lived next door for over 30 years. They knew our family better than anyone. "I'm fine, Charles. Just settling some pending accounts." "I understand," he said, and from his voice I could tell he really did understand. Lucy and I were thinking, "Would you like to come over for dinner tonight?" Nothing formal, just some company. I hesitated. Since Richard's death, I had avoided social gatherings. But suddenly the idea of sitting with old friends, people who really knew Richard and me, seemed comforting. "I would love to, Charles. Thank you." That night in the neighbor's cozy house with the smell of homemade stew in the air, I told them everything. About the lonely funeral, about the decision to change the will, about the confrontations with my children. Lucy held my hand across the table. "You did what you had to do, Helen. Richard would have understood." "They're my children," I murmured finally, feeling the tears I had held back for so long. How did we get to this point? Charles, always the practical one, poured more wine. "Sometimes people take paths we can't understand. You and Richard gave them every opportunity, all the love. What they did with those opportunities was their choice, not yours." Lucy nodded. "Some people don't know how to value what they have until it's too late." "And Daniel?" I asked, thinking of my grandson. "Am I doing the right thing?" "That boy has his head on straight," Charles said. "Richard always said so. If only Alex and Anna were more like the kid," he used to comment. I returned home lighter, not because of the decision itself that was already firm, but from having shared the burden, from having been heard without judgment. The next morning, a letter arrived. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Alex. Not an email, not a text, but a handwritten letter. This was new. I took it to the patio with a cup of tea. The envelope was heavy formal. I opened it slowly. "Mom," it began. "After reflecting on our conversation, I realize you might be right about some things. I wasn't the son I should have been to you and Dad in recent years. Work commitments, life. Everything seemed to pile up, and without realizing it, I put you in the background. About the funeral, there's no excuse. I should have been there. I should have said goodbye to Dad properly. That's a failure I'll carry forever. As for the will, I understand your disappointment even though it hurts. Daniel is a good kid and deserves recognition. Maybe we can talk about a distribution that acknowledges your concerns but doesn't completely cut off your own children. Please consider it. We're family despite everything. With love, Alex." I reread the letter 3 times. It was conciliatory, almost sincere. Almost. The mention of distribution revealed the true motive. Not genuine regret, but negotiation. Still, it was a start. I left the letter on the table without responding. A few words on paper didn't erase decades of neglect, and a single letter didn't undo the image of Richard waiting for visits that never came. Daniel showed up that afternoon carrying a toolbox. "Grandma?" He smiled. "I noticed the patio railing is loose. I thought I'd fix it for you." I watched him work his careful movements, reminding me so much of Richard. The way he frowned in concentration, how he measured twice before cutting. "Daniel," I said when he finished, "there's something I need to tell you." We sat on the newly fixed patio. I explained about the modification to the will, about my decision to leave him everything. He was silent for a long time, eyes fixed on his own hands. "Grandma," he said finally, "I don't deserve this. I didn't do anything special." "That's exactly why you deserve it," I replied. "You didn't do anything expecting something in return. You were just present because you cared." "Mom and Uncle Alex are going to be furious," he murmured. "They already are." He shook his head slowly. "I don't want to be the cause of more conflict in the family." I took his hands in mine. They were working hands with calluses on the palms, so different from his parents' manicured hands. Daniel, your grandfather built everything we have with honesty and hard work. He valued people who did the same. You are the right person to continue what he started." He nodded, his eyes moist. "I'll try not to disappoint you both. I know you won't." When he left, I sat on the patio until dusk, rocking slowly in the chair Richard had built decades ago. The sky turned orange and purple. Then it darkened. The first stars appeared. "Am I doing the right thing, Richard?" I asked the sky. The silence that followed seemed peaceful, as if the universe itself approved. The following week, I received a call from Mr. Martinez. "Helen, I'm just calling to inform you that Alex contacted me." I sighed. What did he want? To know if the will had already been officially registered. When I confirmed it, had he asked about possible challenges? "And what did you tell him?" "The truth. That it's your right to dispose of your assets as you wish, and that the document is legally sound." "Thank you, Mr. Martinez." "He mentioned he will try to speak with you again," the lawyer added. "He said he has a compromise proposal. I imagine he does." I hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Richard and I had coffee every morning for almost 50 years, where the kids did their homework, where we celebrated birthdays, graduations, and promotions. I took a notebook and began to write. Not a will, but a letter, an explanation, something Alex and Anna would read after I was no longer here. Not an accusation, but a testimony. "My dear children," I began, "if you are reading this, I am no longer here. I want you to understand that the decision I made was not out of anger or revenge. I wrote for hours, pouring decades of love, disappointment, and finally acceptance onto the paper. I wrote about the dreams Richard and I had for them, about how we watched with growing sadness the distance that time and money created between us, about how in the end it wasn't the money that mattered, but the presence, the shared time, the small kindnesses that make up a family life, and about how despite everything I still loved them. Because a mother's love doesn't disappear even when it's repeatedly wounded." I finished the letter, sealed it, and wrote on the front, "To be opened after my departure." I put it in the same drawer where Richard kept his most important documents. The doorbell rang at 10 a.m. the next morning. Alex was standing on the threshold, not in his usual executive suit, but wearing jeans and a simple shirt. He looked almost vulnerable. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I let him in. He looked around as if seeing the house for the first time in years. In a way, maybe he was. "Did you change the curtains?" he observed. "Yes, 2 years ago." He looked ashamed. "Can I sit?" I pointed to the sofa. He sat rigidly like a visitor, not like someone who grew up running through these rooms. "I received your letter," I began, "and I spoke with Mr. Martinez." "Mom, before you say anything, I want you to know that I understand your disappointment. We were not the children we should have been." "No, you weren't." He seemed slightly surprised by my bluntness. He expected me to deny, to soften, as I always did. "About the will," he continued. "I thought of a solution that might work for everyone, a compromise." "I'm listening." "Anna and I agree that Daniel deserves recognition. He was present when we weren't. So we propose 50% for Daniel, 25% for each of us." I looked at my son. This man I had cuddled, breastfed, taught to walk and talk. This man who was now negotiating percentages as if we were in a business meeting. "Alex," I said calmly, "this is not a negotiation. It's not a business deal. It's a decision based on who demonstrated understanding of the real value of what your father and I built." "But we're your children," he insisted, a touch of frustration in his voice. "That must count for something." "It does count. That's why I spent decades helping you two financially, paying for your MBA, for Anna's mansion, for the cars, for the trips, for the emergencies. You already received your share, Alex, several times over." He opened his mouth to protest, then he closed it. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes, not anger, but comprehension, as if he finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. Not the material inheritance, but something much more valuable. "I really messed up, didn't I?" he murmured. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stood up slowly. "I'm going to think about all this, Mom." "Do that." At the door he paused. "I miss him," he said softly. "Dad, I only realized how much I miss him when it was already too late." "I miss him too," I replied. "Every day." After he left, I went back to the patio. The rose bushes were beginning to show the first signs of recovery after pruning. Small green buds were emerging on the stems that seemed dead weeks ago. Maybe I thought something was awakening in Alex too, not enough to change my decision. That was made, but maybe enough for him to begin to understand what he had truly lost, and maybe that was a more valuable legacy than any inheritance. Spring arrived without fanfare, painting the garden with new colors. The rose bushes that Richard cared for so lovingly bloomed again, stubborn and resilient, as he always was. I spent my mornings on the patio watching hummingbirds and butterflies, small daily miracles that Richard and I used to point out to each other. 6 months had passed since I changed the will, 6 months of silences and partial reconciliations of attempts and errors. Alex called weekly, now not to talk about money but to ask how I was. Brief, sometimes awkward but genuine conversations. Anna was another story. After our confrontation, she had retreated into a wounded silence. She sent occasional messages about trivial things, but avoided any mention of the will or her father, as if she could erase reality by pretending it didn't exist. Daniel had become a constant presence. He came for lunch on Sundays, sometimes bringing books or small gifts, not the expensive impersonal ones his parents used to give, but things he truly knew I would appreciate. A rare plant for the garden, a handmade bookmark, a mug with a quote from a poet Richard and I loved. That specific Sunday, he arrived with a thick folder under his arm. "What's that?" I asked as we prepared lunch together. He smiled that shy smile that so resembled Richard. "A project. I wanted to show it to you before I start." After lunch, he spread papers over the table, blueprints, drawings, budgets. "Remember we talked about doing something with the house and the cabin?" He pointed to the drawings. "I thought about turning the cabin into a small community library. This neighborhood doesn't have one, and there are so many kids." I examined the detailed plans, the evident care in every detail. "And this," he continued, showing another set of drawings, "is for the main house eventually. Not now, of course," he added quickly, "but one day a community center for seniors, a place where people like you can meet, learn new things, share skills." I looked at my grandson. No longer a boy, but a man with vision and compassion. A man who didn't see property as status, but as an opportunity to make a difference. "Your grandfather would have loved this," I said, my voice slightly choked. Daniel smiled. "Remember how he always said an empty house is a waste of possibilities?" I remembered perfectly. It was one of Richard's favorite phrases, especially after the children left home and the rooms were empty. "Daniel, these plans are wonderful, but it's going to cost a lot of money." He nodded. "I know I'm saving, and I have some friends from college who work with social architecture willing to help with the project." "Why don't we start now?" I asked. He looked at me surprised. "Now, but you wouldn't need—" "Daniel, I'm almost 80 years old. I'd rather see these plans become reality while I'm still here to appreciate them." The smile that spread across his face was worth every penny Richard and I saved during our lives. The following week, I took Daniel to the bank. We opened a joint account and I transferred enough funds to start the cabin project. Not all the money I still had enough sense to ensure my own security, but enough for him to start his dream. The bank manager, a man who had known Richard and me for decades, watched our interaction with a knowing smile. "Richard would be proud," he commented as we finalized the documents. "Yes," I agreed. He always said money is just a tool. What matters is how you use it. When we left the bank, Daniel seemed overwhelmed by the responsibility. "Grandma, I promise I'll do everything right. Every penny will be used as it should be." I squeezed his arm gently. "I know, dear. That's why we're doing this." The news reached Alex and Anna faster than we expected. We didn't tell them, but in small towns like ours, secrets have short legs. especially when they involve bank accounts and construction projects. Alex called that same night. "Mom, I heard you and Daniel opened a joint account at the bank." For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain or justify my decisions. "Yes, we did." A pause. "Can I ask what for?" "To fund a project. Daniel is going to turn the cabin into a community library." Another pause longer. "I see." His voice sounded strangely restrained. "That's an interesting idea." It was his, completely his. "Well, if you need help with documentation permits, anything legal, I'm at your disposal." That offer took me by surprise. "Thank you, Alex. I'll let Daniel know." After hanging up, I stared at the phone for a long time. It wasn't the reaction I expected. Anna showed up the next morning without Frank, without the ostentatious SUV, just her, in a compact, discreet car I didn't even know she owned. "Mom," she said, standing at the door, "can we talk?" I let her in with some trepidation. Our last meeting had not been friendly. She sat in the kitchen where we always had our most important conversations. She looked different, less makeup, simpler hair, less extravagant clothes. "I heard about Daniel's project," she began, "the library in the cabin." I nodded, waiting for the explosion that was sure to come. Instead, she surprised me. I think it's a great idea." "You do?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on the coffee cup I had poured. "Dad always talked about doing something like that. Remember, he had that idea of creating a reading space for the neighborhood kids." I remembered, of course. It was one of Richard's dreams that never materialized. Always postponed until after retirement, after the kids finished college, after we had more time. A later that never came. "Daniel remembered that," I commented. "He paid attention when your father spoke." A shadow of sadness crossed Anna's face. I should have paid more attention, too. We were silent for a moment, the ticking of the wall clock marking the seconds. "I'm getting a divorce," she said abruptly. "What?" She gave a sad smile. "Ironic, isn't it, after everything you and Dad invested in that extravagant wedding?" I didn't know what to say. Anna and Frank had been together for almost 20 years, although they rarely seemed happy. "What happened?" She sighed deeply. "I realized we built a life based on appearances. House too big, car too expensive, parties too elaborate, and no real substance." She looked me straight in the eye. "Since you changed the will, I've thought a lot. About what really matters. About who really matters." "Anna." "No, Mom. You were right." I became exactly the type of person Dad always criticized. Someone who values things over people, who measures success in acquisitions, not in connections. She wiped away a tear, and I missed the chance to say goodbye to him. For the first time in a long time, I saw my daughter. I really saw her. Not the successful executive with expensive jewelry, the absent mother who outsourced her son's upbringing, but the girl who once danced in the rain with Richard, who laughed when he threw her in the air. "It's never too late to change, Anna." She smiled melancholically. "For some things it is. I can never apologize to Dad, but you can honor what he valued from now on." That afternoon, I took her to the cemetery. We stood in front of Richard's simple grave, now adorned with the red roses I brought weekly. Anna knelt, placing her hand on the headstone, as if trying to physically connect with her absent father. I left her alone for a moment, giving her the space she never gave Richard in his final months. From a distance, I watched my daughter, head bowed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A late farewell, but perhaps not too late for her own redemption. On the way back, she asked about Daniel's project. "Can I help in any way? I have experience in marketing. I can help spread the word, get book donations." "I'm sure Daniel would appreciate that," I replied. "Why don't you talk to him?" "Will he want my help after everything?" Daniel doesn't hold grudges, in that he's just like his grandfather. The following Sunday, for the first time in years, I had both my children and my grandson at the same table. The meal started tense, Alex and Anna visibly uncomfortable, Daniel cautiously polite. But as the meal progressed, something began to change. Alex genuinely asked about the plans for the library. Anna offered practical suggestions for outreach and fundraising. Daniel listened, responded, even laughed at one of Alex's bad jokes. It wasn't perfect. There were wounds too deep to be healed in a single meal. But it was a start. When we were having coffee on the patio, Alex cleared his throat as he did when he was nervous. "Daniel," he said, "your project with Grandma is an excellent idea, something Grandpa would have loved." Daniel looked at him, surprised by the unexpected praise. "Thanks, Uncle Alex. If you need help with the legal side permits anything, I'm at your disposal." Anna added, "I can help with marketing, create a website, social media outreach." Daniel looked at me, confused by this sudden change. I gave him a small, encouraging smile. "That would be great," he replied finally. "I'm planning to start the remodel next month." And so, on a warm Sunday afternoon, something small began to grow between my children and my grandson. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not forgetting the past, but it was a quiet acknowledgement of future possibilities. When everyone left, I sat on the patio again, looking at the garden Richard and I cultivated for decades. The rose bushes were in full bloom now, red, vibrant, stubborn in their beauty. "Would you see this as a new beginning or just convenience?" I asked the wind, imagining what Richard would say. I could almost hear him answer with that ironic smile he always had for moral dilemmas. "Maybe it's both, Helen, and maybe it doesn't matter as long as everyone grows in the process." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The cabin remodel began on a sunny Monday in April. Daniel had assembled a small team, friends from the Architecture University, some local volunteers, and surprisingly, Alex and Anna. Alex showed up early wearing jeans and an old shirt clothes I didn't even know he owned. He brought building permit documents already approved, saving weeks of bureaucracy. "I used some contacts," he admitted when I asked. "It's the least I can do." Anna arrived shortly after carrying coffee and pastries for everyone. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail without the usual elaboration. She also brought a laptop and organized folders. "I started the social media push," she explained, showing the website she had created for the future Richard Ramirez Community Library. "We already have pledges for over 500 book donations." I stood watching my children working side by side with Daniel, Alex holding ladders, Anna organizing volunteers, both following their nephew's directions with a humility they had never shown before. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, sideways glances when someone mentioned the past awkward silences, when Richard's name came up naturally in conversation. But there was also something new growing. Respect, perhaps, or at least understanding. At the end of the first day, we all sat on the patio, exhausted but satisfied. Alex had dirt on his expensive pants. Anna had paint in her hair. Daniel was smiling more openly than I had seen him smile in years. "Grandpa would have loved to see this," he commented, looking at the cabin structure, where the old windows had already been removed to make way for large windows that would let in more natural light. "Yes, he would have," Alex agreed, surprising everyone. He always talked about creating spaces where people could grow. I think I only understood what he meant recently. Anna nodded silently, looking at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. In the following weeks, a routine was established. Alex came on weekends bringing materials he got at a discount through his business contacts. Anna showed up almost daily, coordinating donations, organizing fundraising events, creating community enthusiasm around the project. Daniel was the heart of it all, patient, determined, with a clear vision of what the space could become. I watched it all with a mix of emotions: joy for the project taking shape, pride in the man Daniel had become, and a complex melancholy seeing Alex and Anna finally demonstrating the qualities Richard and I always hoped to see in them, too late for him to witness it. One afternoon, I found Anna alone in the cabin, organizing children's books that had been donated. "It's a good start," I commented, looking at the shelves that were beginning to fill. She nodded, running her hand over the colorful books. "You know what's strange? I'm enjoying this much more than my real job." "It's not that strange," I replied. "Your father always said that doing something for others brings a satisfaction that money can't buy." She smiled melancholically. "He told me that many times. I just wasn't listening." We were silent for a moment. "Mom," she continued hesitantly, About the will. I understand why you did what you did, and it's okay, really. I looked at her, surprised. It is, yes, Daniel deserves it. He was present when we weren't. She arranged a children's book on the shelf with excessive care. But I want you to know that I'm not doing this because of the will. I'm not trying to get back into your good graces so you'll change your mind. I know, I replied softly, and I realized it was true. The money was no longer the central point. Maybe it never had been. It was about recognition, presence, shared values. Dad would be happy about this, she said, looking around the space that was being transformed, with all of us working together on something that matters. Alex brought a revelation of his own a few weeks later. He had arrived early on a Saturday bringing materials for the new shelves. "I sold the car," he announced casually as we unloaded wood. "What car?" I asked, knowing exactly which one he meant. "The imported one, the one you and Dad always found excessive." I stopped what I was doing. "Why?" He shrugged, but the forced casual gesture didn't hide the emotion in his eyes. I realized I didn't need it. It was more about impressing others than any real need. He paused. "I used part of the money to invest in a new scholarship fund at the Faculty of Arts in Dad's name." I looked at my son, this man who for so long seemed to have lost track of the values he was raised with, and I saw something of the old Alex re-emerging. The boy who once gave his entire allowance so a classmate could buy medicine for his sick mother. The teenager who spent afternoons teaching seniors how to use computers. "Your father would be proud," I said simply. Daniel seemed the most surprised by the gradual transformation of his uncle and aunt. One afternoon, as we worked together in the garden that would surround the library, he expressed his confusion. "Grandma, I don't understand. 6 months ago, they barely visited. Now they're here almost every day, helping, contributing. What changed?" I reflected for a moment before answering, my hands busy pulling weeds. "Sometimes people get lost," I replied finally. "They get so busy chasing things they think are important, money, status, power, that they forget what really matters. And sometimes it takes something drastic to make them realize. Like Grandpa's death and you changing the will? Maybe. Or maybe it's something simpler. Maybe it's seeing you, the next generation, living by different values, showing another way." He considered that in silence, continuing to dig holes for the flowering bushes that would border the entrance path. "Do you think I should trust this change?" He reflected with the wisdom of questioning motivations, of seeking truths beyond appearances. "Trust, but watch," I advised. "Time reveals the truth of hearts better than any words." 2 months after the start of the remodel, the Richard Ramirez Community Library was almost ready. The shelves filled with donated or acquired books, the walls freshly painted in soft tones, the reading tables strategically positioned to take advantage of the natural light. The inauguration was set for a Saturday in June. Anna had organized everything: invitations for the community local media coverage, a small breakfast for the first visitors. On the morning of the inauguration, I arrived early at the cabin. I wanted a few moments alone in that space before it filled with people and voices. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, creating bright patterns on the restored wooden floor. The shelves, some of them made with reclaimed wood from the original structure, were arranged in concentric circles. Daniel's idea to create corners of discovery, as he called them. On the main wall, a framed photograph of Richard taken years earlier in his garden. He was smiling at this camera, a gardening tool in one hand, a book in the other. Below, a simple plaque, "In memory of Richard Ramirez, who believed that books and gardens are places where dreams grow." I felt silent tears streaming down my face. How Richard would have loved to see this. How he would have appreciated every detail, every careful choice. "He is seeing it, you know." Daniel's voice startled me. He had entered silently, wearing a dress shirt and clean pants for the occasion. "Somehow he's here." I nodded, not trusting my voice to respond. Daniel came closer, putting his arm around my shoulders. "I could never have done this without you, Grandma." "It wasn't me, Daniel. It was you, your vision, your work." He smiled that smile that always reminded me so much of his grandfather. Grandma, I could only do this because you and Grandpa taught me what really matters, and because you had the courage to make a difficult decision when it was necessary." Alex and Anna arrived together, both visibly nervous. Alex carried a box of business books for the professional section, not the quick success ones he used to read, but substantial works on business ethics and social responsibility. Anna brought fresh flowers for the tables and a large leather-bound album. "It's a guest book," she explained, showing the blank pages, "to record the history of this place from the beginning." The inauguration exceeded all expectations. Dozens of people from the community showed up, families with young children, teenagers, seniors. The retired librarian from the local school offered to train volunteers. A group of teachers proposed an after-school reading program. In the midst of the celebration, I noticed Alex talking animatedly with a group of young people about professional mentoring programs. Anna was organizing a list of volunteers for storytime slots. Daniel circulated through the space, introducing people, connecting interests, creating community. Charles and Lucy, our longtime neighbors, approached me. "Richard would be beaming," Lucy commented, observing the scene. "Yes, he would be," I agreed. "You know what's interesting?" Charles said discreetly, pointing to Alex and Anna. "They seem different, more like they were as kids." It was true. There was a lightness about them that I hadn't seen in decades, an authenticity that had been buried under layers of ambition and materialism. "Sometimes," I replied, "we lose sight of what really matters, and sometimes, happily, we find our way back." At the end of the day, when most of the guests had left, I gathered with my children and grandson on the small patio behind the library where Daniel had planted a rose garden in honor of his grandfather. Alex raised a glass of juice. He had recently stopped drinking alcohol, another surprising change. To Richard, he proposed, "Who taught us more than we ever recognized?" To Richard, we repeated in unison. When we returned home that night, me, Alex, Anna, and Daniel, there was a different feeling in the air, not of complete reconciliation. Some wounds were too deep to heal completely, but of understanding, of renewed respect. We sat on the patio as we used to do when the children were little and life seemed simpler. The night was warm, scented with the aroma of roses and jasmine. We talked about trivial things, the weather, the neighbors' plans for the library. Then Alex cleared his throat, as he always did, before saying something important. "Mom," he began, "I've thought a lot in recent months. About Dad, about our choices about the will." I tensed immediately. Was he finally getting back to that after everything we had built? "Alex," I began, but he raised his hand. "Please let me finish. It's not what you're thinking." He took a deep breath. "I wanted to say that you were right, about everything. Anna and I didn't honor what you and Dad valued. We weren't present when we should have been, and the decision you made was the right one." I looked at my son, unable to hide my surprise. "It's true," Anna added. "Daniel deserves everything you decided to leave him. He understands the value of what you built, not just financially, but what it really means." Daniel seemed uncomfortable with the turn of the conversation. "We don't need to talk about that." "Yes, we do," Alex insisted, "to clear the air completely. Mom, we want you to know that we respect your decision. We're not going to contest it ever, and we're not doing all this. The library, the time we spend here, for the money or for any inheritance. We're doing it because we finally understood what Dad tried to teach us all our lives." "That true value isn't in what you have," Anna completed, "but in what you build and the connections you create in the good you do." I looked at my children, these adults, who for so long seemed like strangers to me, and I saw in them finally echoes of Richard. Not perfect, not complete, but present. "Your father would be proud to hear that," I said simply. That night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, I sat in the room I had shared with Richard for so long. I took the letter I had written to my children from the drawer, the one to be opened after my death. I reread it carefully. The words of disappointment, of painful explanation of love despite everything. They were true words when I wrote them, but now they seemed to belong to a different time, to a different version of all of us. I folded the letter and put it back in the drawer. Maybe one day I would rewrite it, or maybe it was no longer necessary. Some truths don't need to be written on paper. They live in actions, in choices, in small daily kindnesses. Richard always knew that, and finally maybe his children were beginning to learn it too. The first anniversary of Richard's death arrived with the autumn. The leaves on the trees had that golden hue he so admired, and the air carried that peculiar mix of melancholy and beauty that October always brings. The community library had become a success beyond our expectations. Children showed up daily after school, seniors gathered for book clubs, teenagers found a quiet space to study. Daniel spent most of his free time there coordinating programs, guiding volunteers, transforming the initial vision into something alive and pulsating. Alex and Anna remained involved, each in their own way. Alex had established a professional mentoring program for low-income youth, using his business contacts to open doors that would normally remain closed to them. Anna organized fundraising events, ensuring the library had the resources to continue growing. On the morning of the anniversary, I woke up early, the habit of decades with Richard. He always liked to watch the sunrise, remained ingrained in my body. I made a cup of tea and sat on the patio watching the sky slowly lighten. 1 year, Richard, I murmured to the cool morning air. It seems like so long and so little time at the same time. I planned to go to the cemetery alone. I hadn't mentioned the date to the children. I didn't want them to feel obligated to participate. Some journeys need to be made in solitude. But as I was preparing to leave, the sound of cars parking caught my attention. Through the window, I saw Alex getting out of his car, no longer the ostentatious imported one, but a simple domestic model. In the car behind, Anna and Daniel got out together. I opened the door before they knocked. "We thought you might like some company today," Daniel explained, holding a bouquet of the same red roses Richard cultivated. I looked at my children, both dressed soberly, both with expressions that revealed genuine understanding of the meaning of this day. "I'd love that," I replied simply. The cemetery was quiet that autumn morning. Dry leaves danced on the ground with the light breeze. We walked together to Richard's grave, a simple headstone as he would have wished, with his name and the dates that marked his time on earth. Daniel placed the roses carefully. Alex brought a small stone that he placed on the headstone, a custom he learned in his recent spiritual rediscoveries. Anna had brought a book of poetry that Richard loved. She opened it and read a few verses in a low voice. I stood back a bit, watching my children and grandson, paying their respects to the man who meant so much to each of us in such different ways. When Anna finished her reading, Alex approached the headstone. "Dad," he said, his voice soft but firm, "it took me a long time to understand what you were trying to teach me, about what really matters, about integrity, about presence." He paused, controlling his emotion. "I know it's late to tell you this, but I hope that wherever you are, you can see that I'm trying to do better. To be better." Anna stepped up next. "Daddy," her voice trembled slightly, "I miss you so much. I miss your stories, your laugh, your advice, even the advice I pretended to ignore." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I seemed to have given up on everything you valued." Daniel was the last. He didn't speak aloud. He just knelt and stayed silent for a long moment, his hand resting on the headstone as if establishing a physical connection with his grandfather. When he stood up, I noticed he had left something small on the grave, the key to the library. Finally, I approached. My children and grandson stepped back, giving me a moment of privacy. "Richard," I murmured, kneeling with some difficulty. The years were beginning to weigh more on my joints. "Look what happened in your absence. It's not exactly what we expected, is it? Life never is." I touched the cold headstone. "But maybe it's better this way. Maybe we needed this shock to find our way back. I love you. I will always love you." When we gathered again to walk back to the cars, Alex hesitated. Then he spoke. "Mom, we'd like to do something special today, a kind of celebration of Dad's life. Not something sad, but a recognition of what he meant to all of us." I looked at my son, surprised by the initiative. "What do you have in mind?" "A family dinner," Anna replied. "At home all together. We'd like to cook for you if you'll let us." The idea of my children, who rarely cooked anything more complex than instant pasta, preparing a dinner in honor of their father, moved me deeply. "Of course," I replied. "Richard would love the idea." In the afternoon, my kitchen transformed into a scene I hadn't witnessed in decades. My children working together, clumsy but determined, preparing Richard's favorite dishes. Alex trying to replicate the special sauce his father made for pasta. Anna struggling with the instructions for the bread pudding Richard adored. Daniel coordinating the efforts, keeping everything under relative control. I sat at the kitchen table watching the organized chaos with a smile. Richard would have loved this. The mess, the occasional laughter when something went wrong, the small victories when something went right. "Dad always said the food didn't need to be perfect," Anna commented, looking critically at her slightly lopsided pudding. "It just needed to be made with love." "And shared in good company," Alex added. When we sat down to dinner, the table set with the best dinnerware, the set Richard and I won at our wedding, and rarely used, I felt a fullness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Alex poured wine for everyone, except himself. He maintained his newfound sobriety with surprising determination, and he raised his glass of water. "To Richard Ramirez," he proposed. "Father, grandfather, husband, mentor. The man who taught us the meaning of integrity, even when we weren't listening." "To Richard," we replied in unison. The food wasn't perfect. The sauce a bit too salty, the pudding a bit soft. But that night, I savored every bite as if it were the most delicious meal I had ever tasted. The conversation flowed naturally, with stories about Richard emerging organically, memories I hadn't heard in years. Alex remembering how his father taught him to ride a bike. Anna telling about the time Richard helped her build a treehouse. Daniel sharing memories of the fishing trips they took together. "Remember the time Dad decided we all needed to learn how to change a tire?" Anna asked, laughing. "He deliberately flattened the car tire and made us change it one by one while timing us." Alex laughed. "I was terrible at it. It took me almost an hour. And he just stood there patiently, not helping, just giving advice when we needed it." Anna completed. "He said practical skills were just as important as any degree." I was surprised to realize that we were actually laughing, not just smiling politely, but genuinely laughing, sharing happy memories instead of mourning the absence. After dessert, Daniel cleared his throat nervously. "I have something to show all of you." He disappeared briefly, returning with a rectangular package wrapped in simple paper. "It's a project I've been working on," he explained, handing me the package for today. I unwrapped it carefully, revealing a leather-bound book. On the cover, in simple gold letters, "Richard Ramirez, A Life of Purpose." I opened it with trembling hands. It was a memory book, carefully compiled with old photographs, excerpts from letters, newspaper clippings about Richard's community projects, testimonies from friends, neighbors, and people whose lives he had touched. "How did you get all this?" I asked, amazed at the wealth of material. Uncle Alex helped contact Grandpa's old work colleagues. Aunt Anna interviewed neighbors and friends. I just put it all together. I flipped through the pages, absorbing the images of a life well lived. A young Richard, smiling next to the used car we bought with so much sacrifice. Richard with little Alex on his shoulders. Richard teaching Anna to plant seeds. Richard and me on our 40th wedding anniversary. And then reaching the final pages, I found something unexpected. Recent photographs, the community library in various stages of construction. Alex mentoring young people in the mentoring program. Anna organizing book donations. Daniel with children during a storytime session. The last page contained a single photograph. The four of us. Me, Alex, Anna, and Daniel. In front of the library on opening day, all smiling under the plaque with Richard's name. Below a simple caption, "The legacy continues." I closed the book, unable to hold back the tears. They weren't tears of sadness, but of gratitude, of recognition that despite all the detours and failures, something essential had been preserved and passed on. Alex and Anna came closer, each placing a hand on one of my shoulders. "Mom," Alex said softly, "we know nothing can make up for the fact that we weren't there when Dad passed, or all the years we were physically present but emotionally absent. But we want you to know, Anna continued, "that we finally understand what you two tried to teach us all our lives, what really matters." I looked at my children, these adults who for so long seemed like strangers to me, and I saw in them finally echoes of Richard. Not perfect, not complete, but present. "Your father would be proud of you right now," I said, holding their hands, "and so am I." Later, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I sat on the patio with the memory book in my lap. The night was clear, starry, the kind of sky Richard and I used to gaze at together. "It didn't happen as we expected, Richard," I murmured to the stars. "But maybe it happened as it needed to." I flipped through the book again, stopping at a particular photo Richard in the garden, teaching little Daniel how to prune roses. The boy looked at his grandfather with absolute adoration, absorbing every word, every movement. In that moment, I fully understood the wisdom of the choice I had made. It wasn't just about money, property, or justice. It was about recognizing where the seed had found fertile soil, where the values Richard and I cultivated with such care had truly taken root. And maybe, just maybe, that seed was now germinating in Alex and Anna too. Late, but genuinely. Time would tell. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt I could wait to see with genuine hope in my heart. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left your jaw on the floor. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you there.